having me here. Great, beautiful, sunny day. My name is Olga. I own and operate Smugtown Mushrooms in Rochester, New York, just a couple hours north of here along Lake Ontario. Beautiful drive. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, I've been mushrooming for like over 10 years, really got into like foraging and wildcrafting for food and for medicine, and then our long winters and my withdrawal of wild fungi pushed me towards cultivation, and that's when I started Smugtown Mushrooms about 7 years ago. And so me and some other people, we cultivate mushrooms for food or for medicine, for regional market, and we also offer cultivation supplies for people to grow their own stuff indoors or outdoors for food or for medicine. And a lot of our strains are from this area that we've captured from the wild. So we like to say our cultures are regionally adaptive, most of them. And so that's amazing. And I teach classes and organize mushroom events all over the Northeast. So please keep in touch, and we're like giving out some cards on the table and stuff like that. But I'm here to talk about polypores, and we're just gonna like go through and discuss how amazing they are, and talk about ones that we can commonly see in our woods. And we have some from the collection here, as well as I brought some polypores that we can like pass around and stuff like that. So thanks for being here. It's a beautiful room, and maybe if people are okay, we'll take like a class picture at the end, and if you don't want to be in it, you can leave. That's totally fine, or stay, but just don't be in the picture. So here we have a beautiful polypore. How many of you have seen this mushroom and know this mushroom? Great. It's recently been changed to Fanatics betalinus. It used to be Polypores betalinus. Or the Birch Polypore, one of my favorite mushrooms. It's a perennial polypore, or excuse me, it's an annual polypore, but you will see it still on the birch tree or the birch log well into winter and into the spring, but it's not actively growing, and it'll push out a new fruit every year. We'll talk more about Birch Polypore. So polypores, why are they called polypores? What is a polypore? Mushrooms are essentially the fruiting body of the organism of the mycelium, which is like the large group of cells working together to eat a substrate. And I have a ton of mycelium here. We can pass this around. This is the mycelium of the wine cap, not a polypore, a guild mushroom, but if we want to pass it around, you can smell the filter. Mycelium has a lovely aroma when it's healthy and not being attacked by other competitors. But mycelium's holding our forest together, running through dead organic matter, detritus. Polypores are huge decomposers within our ecosystems, and you've probably seen them. They're definitely the most abundant, in my opinion, I feel like the most abundant fungus that you'll see in the woods all year round. Many of them will overwinter and withstand rot and decomposition, like these shelf fungi or these comb fungi. And even if the tree falls, new growth will start on the fruiting body, depending on which way down is, if you will, which is amazing. And yeah, they're a good group of mushrooms to start with, you know. So if we're really getting into wild ID and foraging and things like that, ethically foraging, polypores are really safe mushroom, group of mushrooms to get associated with and comfortable with. To my knowledge, none are lethal, but I did hear of maybe one becoming lethal recently. Do you remember that at all? Maybe a couple years ago, or maybe someone got poisoned. And so a lot of people have different reactions to mushrooms, so not everyone, even for an edible that's common, not everyone has the same reaction, but we'll talk about it. A lot of polypores are edible and medicinal. Reishi, turkey tail, maitake. Some of them are used for lumber staining, and they are in abundance in the woods. Here's some. These actually aren't from New York, but I thought I'd show them because we can actually see really more vividly the pores on the underside here, and actually the spore deposit on the lower shelf of this polypore. To be honest, I don't know what these are. This is growing on like a juniper tree in the very arid islands of Greece. And this is growing on like, it looks like a locust family. But I didn't know what had mustard colored spores. But I'm thinking Phelinus, but I don't know. But they're really pretty, and I love the colored mustard, so I wanted to show them. And like even in the field, sometimes you don't have to take a spore print; it's already there for you if you're paying attention, and they're lovely. But enough about Mediterranean polypores. Off to our North American ones. This is actually a cultivated reishi kit that I neglected, and it actually grew through the filter patch and out through the filter patch, and it conked, and it was in a closed room that we did ventilate. We like forgot it was there, and so it sporulated within that room, and that's all the spore deposit of the reishi mushroom on top of it. As you can see, it's a lot, and they are huge spore producers. The reishi or the Ganoderma lucidum, that's actually a culture that we grow that the reishi was found on an oak tree in Genesee Valley Park up in Rochester, and it rips. It like grows so quickly from inoculation and fruiting, it's like 40 days. So it's a really good one. So some of our polypores are decomposers or saprophytic fungi. Some of them are considered parasitic or necrotrophic. Our chicken mushroom or sulfur shelf, or Latiparus sulphureus. Who has seen or eaten this lovely friend of ours? Great, a huge group of people. I just did a class in Cleveland and no one has ever seen this mushroom before. I was like, oh my goodness, hopefully they will now that we've opened their eyes to the possibility of something this bright and that large to be growing so maybe sometimes in an urban environment, and it's edible in its prime state of growth. So a lot of people get really overzealous and like find this mushroom and they take out their knife and they're sawing through the mushroom, and then they like add like a pound of butter and they're still like chewing like drywall type of chicken fungus. That, yeah, we want to eat the mushrooms. Just because it's edible doesn't mean that it's edible at that stage, essentially. So we really want to make sure. And one thing that, you know, in homage to the late Gary Linkoff, he would always say that a lot of the mushroom poisonings are basically from people that eat mushrooms that are a little bit past, that they're like making themselves sick from like rotted mushrooms. So you might find a lion's mane or a chicken mushroom or maitake or something that is edible, but it's a little bit past prime and it's getting consumed by something else, and yeah, it gets tricky. So if you can cut through the mushroom or the chicken like butter, and it's really easy, you're not sawing the, you know, the shelf off, then it's good to go. But it's poured on the underside, and I want to make sure we know what that means so we can pass around. And sometimes you'll need a hand lens, and it wasn't a mandatory thing, so it's okay that you all don't have a hand lens. But I will pass around some groups of polypores that have decent polypore structure. And so we want to like look on the underside or the spore dispersal surface of the shelf or of the turkey tail. And if we look really close, we can tell that those are pores. They're not gills like a portobello. They're not spines or teeth like a lion's mane or a hedgehog mushroom. They're these pores that don't separate. So, oh, more chicken, beautiful. I have a love affair. So parasites, right? Just to like backtrack a little bit, we have the parasitic, you know, this is a living tree being consumed and attacked by our lovely favorite, one of our favorite edibles, and we're really happy about it, as you can see. And some of these polypores are decomposing in two ways. Some of them are causing white rot, some of them are causing brown rot. Basically, it's basically dependent on, and some of them do both, but a lot of them are separated based on that. And some of them are strictly eating the cellulose, while others are strictly eating the lignin. So this is kind of the difference, and this is from Tom Volk's website, one of the many. And yeah, the brown rot, you'll notice, and we've probably seen this, like rotted trees that like, it looks like they're just like perfect like puzzle pieces, like cubed in the field, and that's the work of brown rot fungi. They make the wood, the decaying wood, cubical, it's darker, and while the white rot fungi that degrade the lignin end up having this like shreddy, almost like shredded chicken look, if you will. Everything looks like chicken in the woods. By the way, so most polypores, and this isn't true for all of them, but most polypores, we can't like physically separate the port layer from like the flesh of the cap or the pileus. So the only like maybe lookalike that you'll see, because yeah, not all polypores are like shelf-like or conch. We'll see some polypores that do have a classic like cap and stem looking type of anatomy. But we might see that they're really fleshy, they're really spongy. You might be looking at a bolete, which has like, when it's older, a very easily separable, most of the time easily separable tube layer. So when we do like a cross section of this, it's more like little straws like living together side by side versus like a blanket of like poured surface. So really cool. And then also, polypores are typically, they're decomposing, they're, making all that dead organic matter back into food for plants to use again. So they're growing on a substrate like wood or fallen logs and dying trees and things like that, versus boletes are typically growing from the ground or terrestrially, because their mycelium is having an association with the plants within the forest. So they're mostly growing from the ground, straight up. But we love boletes. They bring us our porcinis and our bicolor boletes and our, all these other common names. But we have a rich diversity of boletes within our area here. This might be the first polypore you see in the woods in the spring. That's edible. I might be wrong, but there's other polypores that come out around this time, but definitely one that like when it's younger and its prime stage, people do consume this one. This is also called the dryad saddle or pheasant's back. Yeah, this is like definitely like an April, May, June fungus, like when it's like freshly growing. April, if it's like getting warm really quick, we'll start seeing this. People that do eat this when it's young, like it has a flavor and like aroma of like watermelon. Has anyone ever eaten this mushroom? What do y'all think? Watermelon, do y'all like it? Okay. No one's raving reviews over there. It's okay. I don't really eat it. I usually don't find it when it's like that prime stage where before it really flattens out. And it's like the mushroom itself is mature and it's like getting to like full sporulation. But they're great and they're beautiful, and it's a good sign that there's enough water and mushrooms are popping, and yeah, it's beautiful. And these are really common in urban areas as well. Just, and I might have the name of this wrong, but just like seeing the type of polypores, sometimes like if it's like low to the ground, blades of grass will like grow right through them, and you'll harvest the mushroom or like even just let it sit there and you'll be able to pull the blade of grass right through the polypore, because they're like not really touching each other. It's the cutest. So, we talked about like uses, but we're gonna get kind of in the nitty gritty, like why do we care about polypores? Like, yeah, they're breaking down dead organic matter and they're doing a lot of the work that we need to, make soils and things like that. But they're also food. We have medical uses or medicinal uses. They're used as tinder. maybe not as much anymore, but many of them, their common name is the tinder conch, like the Fomes fomitarius right here. And there's early evidence of humans using this like up to like 5,300 years ago. Many of these mushrooms, especially our perennial fungi, or the mushrooms that go dormant and overwinter and don't rot, are perennial fungi. They're used for tinder, for medicinal purposes. Some are used to sharpen knives, topically for poultices and like pain. Many of them are used for dyeing fabrics, art, ornaments, and the list goes on. They're great decomposers. People are using them for research in microremediation and a ton of other things that my brain is not allowing me to say right now, but I'm going to pass around the artist conch because people make beautiful art with the Ganoderma applanatum, and I'll show you one there, but which is this mushroom. This is just older, but if we had gotten this fresh, the poor spore dispersal surface, if we like ran our finger like that, it would bruise brown and it would stay, and or we can like etch little love notes in it, and it stays forever. One of, I don't find these very often, and actually, let's go back real quick about the Fomes fomitarius, because we should give homage a little bit more. This is also called the Amadou fungus. People in Eastern Europe hammer it out and make like a felt out of it. They make like purses and hats. You've probably seen Paul Stamets with like the mushroom hat on, or Robert Rogers. So this is like definitely called the tinder fungus or tinder conch for good reason. It definitely catches spark really easily. It's also able to like, you can drill out a carving or carve out a little hole and add an ember from your fire and cap it and carry it to your next camp and start a fire a lot easier. Like it's our first big lighter or something, or a Zippo, I had a friend who a few years ago was like finding these in the woods, and he was reading a book about making medicine from this. And so the book suggested that he should dry it in the oven with it open, little on low, just to dry it so he can tincture it, which, we won't talk about that technique anyways, but they started catching embers. So like, he's like, oh, well, these are done. I can't like do anything. They're like caught on fire. And he like puts them in the sink, and he hears that thinking they're completely out, throws the mushrooms in the garbage, goes to the bar, and gets a call. Come in. There's just people at the door. Goes to the bar, gets a call like 3 hours later, and it's his roommate, and his roommate's like, hey, I think your mushrooms burnt the house down. Yeah, in Philadelphia. Yeah, my buddy from Mycopolitan, that's the best mushroom name for a farm. But yeah, so just make sure you're like soaking it for real, not like a quick dunk, because it's still alive. That fire's still in there. So even like with like soaking in water, it was still able to keep going. Yeah, Fomes fomitarius, incredible. Also a strong antibiotic, anti-inflammatory. Theory goes that Otzi the Iceman was using this to treat his parasites, maybe start some fires, who knows, but multi-use mushroom and or fruiting body, if you will. Beautiful. I don't see these enough because it's definitely one of my favorite and most delicious polypores. This one is from out west, but this one is from West Virginia. This is the cauliflower mushroom in the genera or genus Spiraceus. I believe this is crispa, and that's Spathula, but I could be wrong. Or they're both the same thing. They're delicious. They kind of have like an egg noodle texture, and like even like the base of it that's like pretty solid. You're like, oh well, this is like the base of it. It's not that tender. You can grate it and then like saute and make like little patties or something with it. It's just like the whole thing's edible and it's delicious. And I see it. on the East Coast associated with like killing pine or conifer or fir. And then out west, this one was growing at the base of an ancient Douglas fir tree. It was huge. It doesn't look that big, but it was like that big. It was great. Yeah, you know, this is the art, you know, all mushrooms are magic, and like we etched into those when they were fresh, and it stays. If you have this and the surface is still white but it dries out, you can use a wood burner to make beautiful images on. And this is the Ganoderma applanatum, tomato, also known as the artist conch. And I think we're passing her around with the little love note on there. But polypores, we get excited when we find our like favorite edibles, and we find a lot of them. This is from a few years ago. Believe it or not, so this stump was like on a hill, and so the stump like was exposed like going down the hill, and there was like another like 40 pounds of chicken. But there's a ton of poison ivy, and that is how I first got poison ivy. Because I was like, oh, I don't get poison ivy, let me go get it. And that plant was like, oh, you think you don't get it? And I did, and it was the worst. I was like, why is this happening to me? It was bad, but people get so excited. I mean, it's a huge, beautiful chicken mushroom. You know, the tips of that I feel are good as you get like closer to the center. You know, it gets a little bit fibrous and stuff like that, which doesn't mean we can't like utilize it for food, but like maybe we dry it and powder it. That's a way to maybe utilize it, or we dry it, or we use it fresh and we make tincture or extract out of it, because even though this is edible, it also has medicinal properties, anti-inflammation, antibiotics, and so forth. How many have eaten this? I know you found it. Y'all have eaten it. Beautiful. Has anyone eaten the cauliflower in all their life? Nice. You find it out east? Did you find it? Not too often. Great. You can also make musical instruments with your polypores. So this is Willoughby Aravelo's, what does he call this? It's a soundboard. And he like does noise music and stuff like that. And this is like Ganoderma oregensi. This is from out west. But yeah, he carved into it, ran some wires, and has it jacked to a larger speaker system. And we can be really creative with our polypores, you know, they're multi-dimensional. We can use polypores to dye our fabric. So I know this sounded weird after I didn't complete the sentence. We use polypores to dye fabric. This is legit the dyer's polypore, Phaeolus schwanentii, and I hope it's still called that. Is it still called that? So that's what I assume it's still called. You'll find these on the base of coniferous or pine trees usually. They're both the same mushroom, might be different species, but they're both found these were both found in Pennsylvania. Using different mordants, you can get a multitude of different colors. Inedible, but people use it for dyeing fabric. Some beautiful young Ichnoderma resinosum. We probably see these in like late summer, and you know, mixed hardwood forest. They get really sweaty. They release these metabolites, and somebody just want to go right up to them and lick them because they just look so delicious. But these are like really young ones. We can see like further back that there's some glistening, but it's just starting to sweat. And these are like really young. They're actively growing, so there's like that white margin. A lot of times when we see polypores in the wild and there's that like really bright white margin, maybe on reishi or artist conchs, you know, that means it's actively growing, and it's a great time to potentially harvest or for medicine or just to enjoy, because it's beautiful. Some other polypores, we have our Trametes versicolor, our turkey tail, beautiful, found coast to coast, one of the most well-studied medicinal mushrooms out there. We'll talk about some of their properties soon, but a lot of people get this confused with like 5 other genuses out there, genera. But yeah, true turkey tail it's more white on the underside, and you can really see the pores. So I'm going to pass around some false turkey tail, or turkey tail lookalikes. Do we have the turkey tail that was flopping around? Do you mind bringing it up here?
And the hand lens, has somebody got their hand lens?
Yeah.
Cool. Just so we can pass these around together. It's probably going to take a little bit, like, for it to get around, but the false turkey tail is like really smooth, and you're barely going to see pores because it's considered parchment, right? Stearium?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a parchment fungus. So it's not a true polypore, but it looks like it, and they grow in the same habitats. Sometimes they're growing on the same log together. So the fuzzier one is true turkey tail, and you'll see that it's white, it has the pores, and it has like, yeah, a little fur and these like zoned out rings on them. And then the false turkey tail, or one of the many false turkey tails, doesn't have pores. So we'll pass those around. And I wish I had like 4 options for people to look at, but I don't. And I do have some other turkey tail lookalikes up here for like after the class. You can kind of see some Trichaptum biforme, which is also called the violet tooth polypore, because it looks and grows like turkey tail, a lot of times in the same habitats, like fallen logs and trees and things like that. But if you look on the underside, it's very tooth-like, and it's beautiful violet. And I don't have a picture of it. Actually, I might, but we're only from the top. So you can see, check those out. And I have some other like maze guilds, polypores up here, some serenas, and yeah, some other tremettes, but not like a true turkey tail or tremettes versicolor, but different species. And then, so turkey tail is actually more of an annual. We might see it, but it actually like fruits another set of fresh fruiting bodies every year. It's more of an annual versus the Ganoderma applanatum, or the artist conch. It's a perennial mushroom or a fungus where it'll go dormant, and then as long as there's still food, it'll grow another layer, another ring, if you will, from its source, from the substrate. My favorite, medicinal mushrooms. So many, everything that you're passing around has some type of medicinal property, fever reducing, anti-inflammatory, natural antibiotic, immune modulating. It's amazing. And this is half the reason why I love mushrooms, is because I really like just being able to go in the woods and find dinner and have some tea. It's just the best thing ever. But as we populate and as more people are like returning to the wild, if you will, and like relearning our ancient traditions of life, how it used to be, there's a lot of like other people like going in the woods and stomping around, and like we might feel like our wild spaces are so vast and endless, but they have been like trampled over so many times. And I really think that the future of like medicinal mushrooms and like mushrooms in general, for us to like really be sustainable, because like, right, we have probably noticed there's more mushroom stuff in the grocery store, there's more mushroom powders, and everyone wants chaga in their latte, and we really gotta like think like, is this sustainable? And I don't think it is, like, for a long-term concept. And I really do encourage people to like, maybe I'm gonna grow reishi, this year, instead of like going to harvest from the hemlock, gullies in the area and stuff like that, even though that is a beautiful hemlock reishi. But yeah, just something to consider, because I think it's important to listen to the land and pay respects, if you will. But medicinal mushrooms, we've been using them for a really long time. Like, written history goes back 5,000 years and more. We take penicillin for granted, but that's a mold that revolutionized antibiotics, and most of us would probably have had it, unless we're allergic to it or some derivative of it. There's a little under 300 varieties of medicinal mushrooms that have had studies from isolated compounds showing results in mice trials, rats, and human trials, double-blinded, and so forth. So let's get to it. Can I just get a time check, because I'm kind of don't know what time it is. It's 7:30? Okay, great. Let me take a swig. This is water. It's vodka, just joking. Sorry. Sorry, I'm excited. All right, turkey tail, we just talked about her. We're going to talk about her again, just for a little bit. It's a beautiful cultivated variety that we grow. Named versicolor because really that coloration I feel like is so variant. It could be like these dark blues and blacks and stuff, but I've seen it with like oranges and reds and browns and golden colors. So the name suits it, in my opinion. Also known as Coriolis versicolor, but it's Tremetes here. It's definitely one of the most well-studied mushrooms for medicinal purposes. It's found coast to coast. I believe it grows both on conifer and on deciduous. They're probably two different species, but they look really similar. Traditionally, Native Americans were using this potentially for food preservative, putting it in foods to prevent spoilage, because spoilage is pretty much microbes breaking down food and making it not useful for us. And turkey tail has strong antibiotic properties, allowing for mild food preservation. Yeah, lots of uses traditionally, but all in all, we're seeing like strong antimicrobial effects that First Peoples and like people within Central America and Mexico are using it topically for ringworm and impetigo, topical staph infections. Strong anti-inflammatory, fever reducer. This is a great mushroom, like to make a tea, to have a tincture. We're feeling sick, and we want to like boost our immune system. Like this is definitely one that I personally feel like it's like you don't have to take it every day to like start feeling the effects if we're like feeling a little run down and stuff. But in traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, it does increase circulation, clearing heat and dampness. And that's just like a different form of thinking about our health and bodies, but it's really cool. And Japan has been using this obviously for thousands of years, but just to put into perspective, their cancer research budget, even back in 1987, was 25% of their budget was going to research involving Tremetes versicolor. So that's incredible. We might be in the dark ages over here. I don't know what's happening, but they've isolated. I mean, they use a compound isolated from turkey tail called crestin is what the brand is, but it's from a polysaccharide that's been isolated from turkey tail. And it's immune modulating. Our immune system gobbles it up, and it helps people undergoing chemotherapy and radiation for so many reasons. Beautiful. So this looks like it's growing from the ground, but there's a buried log underneath that soil. This is it growing in a greenhouse over the winter, actually. So we've done some research where for most people, like they have to shut down their greenhouse in the winter if they're not heating it. And we found that like these actually, if we put them in there like end of November and make sure there's a lot of water within the greenhouse and like going in there periodically to water, these will fruit very slowly throughout the season, and you basically grew a ton of turkey tail over the winter and you didn't have to really do anything because they just want to grow as long as like you cut little slits in the sides of the plastic and there's enough water, because they don't mind freezing. because that freeze and thaw they really like and makes them really beefy. just a little tidbit. Our reishi mushroom, Linksy, Ganoderma lucidum. You know, there's probably like 6 to 7 different species of our reishi of different, different species, lucidum, sessile, Kurtzii, and so forth. Within the northeast, this is our reishi culture that's growing from a sawdust block. But this is a superior medicinal, been used for also thousands of years. Considered a Shen herb in traditional Chinese medicine, helping with the nervous system and muscle relaxation. Over time, helping with anxiety and insomnia and like overactive nervous systems. Great for the lungs, great for the heart, great for people who have asthma and just like overall, pulmonary, like upper respiratory conditions. This is definitely one that we want to make sure that if we are going to start taking it for like medicinal purposes, we want to make sure we're not on blood thinners and like pills for like hypertension as well, because it could like negate both, and then you're like not where you want to be, basically. Some beautiful reishi. This is one that's growing on a conifer in the Arboretum in Rochester. I'm not entirely sure if it's Suge or not, but that's Ganoderma Suge. Ganoderma meaning shiny skin in Latin. So that was from the Tug Hill region. Y'all ever heard of Tug Hill?
Yeah.
It's great. They get a lot of snow up there, and their mushrooms are pretty great if it's a good wet summer. I don't give out secrets very often, so. But it's beautiful, and we probably have seen them in the forest here if we're like paying attention in like June and July. You know, this is like basically just about at its tail end of like being like actively growing. When it's like really growing fast, like that white margin can be like really thick. So that's about at the end of its fruiting cycle, if you will. Here's some more. These are done, and these were actually probably, I think this was like in the winter, even though there's no snow, but even though they're annuals, okay, they're still like there, but if you look on the underside, there's like a ton of different molds and things like that, and that is just not how we want to find our reishi. We want to have it have that nice thick margin of white and like actively growing if we are going to harvest for medicine. And that goes for the same way if we're cultivating. We want to make sure we're harvesting our cultivated mushrooms at their optimal time. The Ganoderma Suge. Questions? Yeah.
So, with the really big hen mushroom that you harvested, you said that you would use the core to make a powder for consumption. How do you reconstitute that? How do you use that?
Well, I would take it, like I would take like the more tougher parts and I would chop them up into smaller pieces and throw them in a dehydrator or in the sun, whatever you want to do. And then you can leave them like chopped up or small like that, and then you can reconstitute them, or like when as is, you can add them like to your bone broths and soup stocks and things like that. Or you can take them when they're smaller pieces that are already dried, and then they'll be easier to like break up into a powder using like a mortar and pestle or some other process, Vitamix or whatever. And then you can just add that powder to like soup or gravies or stock or, you know, stews and things like that. So like, you know, you're not like getting the like, you know, cardboard, but you're still getting the like nutritional value and therapeutic value.
Thank you.
Yeah. Want to hear something funny? So I was supposed to teach a cooking class yesterday, cooking 4 different kinds of mushrooms for everyone. I was like so excited. I'm like, I love cooking for people. And I was just like, hey, just seeing like what pots and pans I should bring. They're like, oh, we actually don't have a kitchen. I'm like, wait, you all asked me to like teach a cooking class on like mushrooms, and like how am I supposed to do that without like a stovetop and an oven and like a kitchen? They're like, well, we figured you just like pre-cook everything and bring it and like pass out recipes. I want to cook for people. I'm not trying to like cook at my house. I barely do that, and it's more difficult sometimes. But yeah. So one day we will cook together, and it'll be amazing. So Hen of the Woods, or Maitake, or Grifola frondosa. How many of you have found this lovely beauty? Beautiful. So we find this like late summer if we're getting our cool nights that soon, or like well into fall, sometimes late fall. But once it starts getting like really like frosty at night, these kind of like pitter out, but they last long. You know, even though these are an annual polypore, and they're fleshy and they're edible when they're at their prime stage of edibility, they kind of hang out on the vine, if you will, for a while. So they'll withstand rot for a while, but eventually they'll get like colonized by other fungi and molds and things like that. And we're typically seeing them at the base of old oak trees. I have seen this growing at the base of beech trees, as well as birch trees. Only once on the birch and a few times on the beech. But yeah, they're divine and they're so lovely and they're competitive. And this is a mushroom that you'll find in an urban setting, sometimes in old cemeteries and school campuses. You know, you just gotta know which oak tree you're looking at, essentially. But they're delicious. And a great way to get this medicine is just to eat it. This is also one that like you might find it a little bit past, but not like maybe a little past for you to like have a, you know, delicious dinner, but it still might be good to like gather for medicine and things like that. And this is one that we can tincture, we can dry whole sometimes and just like reconstitute for soup stocks and things. But it's definitely a versatile mushroom that like I like to do similar things with, like I said, with the chicken mushroom. But yeah, these are just great. This mushroom's definitely they've been doing studies with this mushroom for like people that their sugar index is too high to lower their glycemic levels. This has been used for people for helping with pre-diabetic symptoms. It's a natural anti-inflammatory, immune modulating. People in China are definitely doing research with this for breast cancer and ovarian cancer as well. And they're loaded with those polysaccharides, like we talked about turkey tail having PSK or crestin or polysaccharide crestin. Well, all these mushrooms, most of these mushrooms that we're talking about have these long chains of polysaccharides, or they're actually more like three-dimensional polysaccharides that the pharmaceutical companies are spending billions of dollars to try to recreate, and they are having a tough time with it because they're so complex. But our immune system gobbles them up, and that gives our immune system really great, just like response rate for free radicals and cancer cells and just overall invaders within our system. So they're immune modulating in the sense where they're bringing our immune system up, but they also are helping with like regulating overactive immune systems with autoimmune conditions as well. Maitake. Question?
Could you inoculate oak stumps?
You could. This is a tough one. You know, I definitely provide it, but it's not like the most successful as far as like straight inoculation into logs or trunks and stuff like that, or stumps. But we are seeing more like success with like highly inoculated logs, partially buried. It takes like 2 years, but you know, you're growing maitake. It's really how much dedication you want to it. Or people are taking the colonized blocks, like the sawdust blocks, and burying those in like wood chip beds underneath like herbaceous plants. And you know, usually end of August, they're like fruiting like small clusters. You know, not a ton, but it's still, you know, nice to have outdoor maitake. My backseat driver. You know, you're cruising, when you're cruising down the road, you're finding these, you know, like it's fun. Here is like a you know, a cross section. You can see like the fronds. This is like so young, so perfect. Like the fronds are barely like large, and like you still have this like nice like mass that you can like grate or do like slabs of it and like pan sear it and stuff, and so good. This was found in the Laurel Highlands in southwestern Pennsylvania. Lots of beautiful old growth there. This was like probably off the ground like that much, but there was just so much. It's just like, it's huge oak tree, beautiful, beautiful mushroom. And then here we have, it's like, this is older, but still like fleshy enough to like rip by hand. I really like taking this mushroom and breaking it apart by hand and making like strips out of it instead of like cutting it with a knife. I do that with like chicken mushroom and stuff like that because you're getting that like meat, that true meat texture, and all the surface areas exposed, and it's really good. And sometimes like with maitake at like an older stage like this, you can start seeing like pores actually like on the top of the fronds as well. Just trying to get them spores out, you know? Two beautiful polypores hanging out in some soup stock. Both were dried. This is like a maitake I like left in a paper bag in my fridge and like got back from like a 5-week trip, and it was like totally fine. No mold or anything on it. And I just added it to some soup stock that I was making. So, you know, very versatile, and that's with some homegrown reishi as well. I've only found this once. This is a more rare polypore. This polypore makes a sclerotia underneath the soil. So a lot of times, like when you find it once, like there's a good chance that it's gonna keep on popping from that area. But this is Polypores umbellatus, or the umbrella polypore. To the untrained eye, I hate saying that, but like, you know, to someone not paying attention, you might think that's maitake, but it is indeed that lovely, delicious, and highly medicinal mushroom. There's like another cluster down there that we left. It was such a great day. It is definitely more tender and delicious than maitake, if you can believe it. Has anyone eaten this in all their days? Lucky you. Love it. Birch Polypore. We saw it. That was our leader into this fine PowerPoint presentation. Birch Polypore, I guess the old name's still on there. Sorry. They used to be called Fungi betalinus. Now it's Fungatopsis betalinus. Betula meaning birch. A lot of these mushrooms and these fruiting bodies are theoretically getting a lot of their medicinal properties from the substrate that they're growing on, and birch being a highly prized medicinal plant, especially, you know, for thousands of years as well. I brought some Birch Polypore Band-Aids. So, here, if you want to pass those around. You know, I find them, sometimes they're really big, they can get really big, and I'll cut them, I don't know, radially, if that's what I'm cutting, I don't know. I'm cutting it out, and then I'll dry them, and sometimes if they're like that thick, they'll dry out to even that big, but you can rehydrate them and use them topically for bacterial or fungal infections, or just in general trying to keep a wound clean and healing well. It'll dry on your skin and stay on your skin. So when you hydrate it and like put on your skin, you wrap with gauze, as it dries, it'll just like stay there. It's pretty incredible. And they just have strong antibiotic properties, like all these lovely mushrooms that we've been talking about. This is the other fruiting body that Otzi was hanging out with. So Otzi had the tinder conch, Fomes fomentarius, and they also had the Birch Polypore. Maybe he was using them interchangeably. Both could be tinder for use. Both could be used for parasitic cleansing with like, you know, strong teas as well, fever reducing, just like overall like amazing. There's been evidence of, you know, proto-humans using these like clear out beehives from like wild bee crevices and things like that. But it's beautiful, and these are some of the triterpenes that are present within Birch Polypore. Chaga, also obviously a lovely medicinal. Chaga is theoretically a sclerotia. It's like a resting reserve body of the mycelium of the fungus Inonotus obliquus, which is a polypore, right? Inonotus obliquus, yes. That we usually don't ever see the fruiting body. We usually see the sclerotia, this lovely sclerotia. And they're always like growing from the birch tree, just like the Birch Polypore. And I like to maybe think that like if we are trying to use the medicinal properties of chaga, that Birch Polypore is like a nice, more sustainable substitute. They're definitely more common. Robert Rogers, author of the Fungal Pharmacy, thinks from other studies that like chaga usually is only found like 1 in 20,000 birch trees. So it's rare, and like typically we're not seeing chaga and Birch Polypore and Fungi solimitarius like hanging out in the same woods. Like they don't mix well. So if we, one thing to like notice maybe, if we're looking for chaga and we see Birch Polypore and Fungi solimitarius, like there's a good chance we're not gonna find chaga. So just like little tricks. But it's amazing. Some beautiful, you know, these are, yeah, just like fresher pieces. These are from a cemetery in Notre Dame, you know, just like a municipal cemetery. Beautiful fruiting bodies. This is where I also found maitake growing at the base of birch. Was not this specific birch tree, but within the area. So cool. My dog. I was trying to put that like huge Ganoderma suge around her like a mane, but she wasn't having it. That's Lucy. Some beautiful homegrown reishis. You know, this is our Rochester reishi culture. You know, I like to call it reishi, even though some people might be like, there's no true reishi in North America. You know, because geneticists have different theories on European strains and species coming over to North America. But hey, if it grows on a hardwood, in my eyes, I think it's a reishi. But it's a beautiful Ganoderma species nonetheless, and we can see that this is like a younger growth because that white margin's thicker. But you know, it looks like fairies just like went around shellacking all of the mushrooms. Some publications that I suggest, I love and live by the Fungal Pharmacy if we're into medicinal mushrooms. Robert Rogers, I definitely think wrote the most definitive guide to date. Christopher Hobbs has also published some books on medicinal mushrooms, and he's definitely well versed. Mushrooms Demystified, it's a great field guide, as well as anything by Arlene and Alan Bassett, especially for the Northeast. Mushrooms Demystified is definitely more of like a West Coast book, but it's like great reading. But I would say it's North American for sure, and it's a good read. He's a great author, and it's not as like cut and dry, like just like dichotomous keys and pictures, and he tells stories and people's accounts, and it's like really cute. The Fifth Kingdom, classic book, just on mycology in general. Paul Stamets' stuff, and then Earth Repair, which is a book on like mycoremediation as well as phytoremediation, using plants and mushrooms to clean up toxic spaces that we've created, whether it's industrial waste, agricultural waste, or radiation, metals, and things like that. that's a great book as well. And, you know, we're getting to the tail end of this, so yeah, I just like to remind people that mycelium, right, that network of cells that's like within that bag that we passed around, mycelium's also like underneath this whole structure and within every part of our soil, and fungi are everywhere. And I really like to think that they're the great messenger, and they're connecting all life. And we all know that they're from the forest to our feet, fungi are everywhere. And I like to thank y'all for fighting fungophobia and breaking the stigma and appreciating this beautiful kingdom of organisms, because they are indeed so lovely. Here's a beautiful cluster of a flush of chicken mushrooms. But you know, polypores and mushrooms in general are great composters and decomposers, creating life from death. They have those remediated qualities that I just mentioned. And that field of study is called microremediation, where we can use mycelium of multitudes of different mushrooms, excuse me, and fruiting bodies. Their mycelium can be used to filter out soil, water, air, and so forth. Mycelium is amazing. Obviously, we're all here. Thank you so much. This is, you know, guilty self-promotion. We're doing a really cool, like, full-day medicinal mushroom class in Ithaca in a few weeks in collaboration with Bramble and Groundswell and Stephen Gabriel at Wellspring Farm. We're going to be making tincture and fire cider and bone broths or veggie broths with mushrooms, and talking more in depth about medicinal mushrooms for our health. And yeah, thank you so much. If people have questions, and I have, we have some polypores here. I brought some kits and things like that, like if people have any questions, and otherwise, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. So, do you guys mind just like being awesome and like being in the picture? Is that okay? I'm gonna get right here and pretend like I didn't teach. And I'm just